I don't know how it happened. It just happened. That is the pathetic excuse that was given by the perpetrator in this heinous crime. Things like this don't just happen. We are here today in Woodmere Cemetery in Huntington, West Virginia, to take a look at the lives and pay the respects to the victims of this horrific crime. Forgotten by time, lives ended by the hand of someone else in cold blood. We finish their stories because they were not able to finish their own. You're watching Vintage Murder, a Whit Docs series. Henry Clay Worth III was said for the most part to be quiet and well-mannered. His reputation at the steel plant in which he worked was good. He had recently been furloughed but was still working in a labor pool and stayed busy. On the flip side, he had a reputation for being very impulsive, and that would lead him to have several brushes with law enforcement. His wife, Mrs. Worth, was also employed at a local brazier factory. Henry Worth III also had a fascination with firearms, and it was said that rifles and pistols could be found in every room of the house. So we've spent some time looking into the life of Henry Clay Worth III. So why have we spent so much time visiting and looking at the gravesite of Penny K. Qualls? Penny, along with her cousin Linda Qualls, would babysit for the Worth family. As a matter of fact, Linda's mother would be out with Mrs. Worth at a baby shower on a Friday night in March of 1960. The two girls, aged 12 and 13, were babysitting for the Worths that very night. When Mrs. Worth and Mrs. Qualls returned to the home, they found both girls brutally shot to death. Henry Clay Worth III and the Worth children were nowhere to be found. However, the scene in the house would be most heinous. Linda was found shot in the head with her knees doubled up. Blood stained the floor. Penny, whose gravesite we're visiting today, was shot in the back of her neck, apparently while on her knees. She would be dead on arrival at the hospital. Police Chief Herman Frazier was able to identify the type of weapon used, a .22 rifle, one of the smallest in the home that was filled with firearms. So where was Worth? It turns out that he took his children to nearby Ashland, Kentucky, and stayed away from the scene for about 6 hours. For whatever reason, he returned to the approximate location of the crime and was stopped immediately by police. It was said that the children were asleep in the car, and he surrendered meekly. Ironically, Worth was the grandson of a prominent Huntington judge, and at the police station, he was stripped of his blood-stained suit over which he was wearing a topcoat. And here was the big question that police would need to solve. Will he confess, as he was the only obvious suspect, or would he try to deny the horrific crime? The only explanation given by Worth was that he had been drinking, and it just happened. Now we would go to trial. The trial would take place a short time later. In reviewing details of the trial, the team of Henry Clay Worth III would have 2 psychiatrists testify in the trial, stating that he was of unsound mind when the crime occurred. This, along with the testimony from his mother that he was born out of wedlock and was not a normal child, tried to paint a picture to the jury that he was not mentally stable and that his upbringing caused lasting harm. It was said that during the trial, Linda Qualls' mother would sob loudly as she told her story of what had happened the night of the shooting. The courtroom scene was tense when the verdict was given. In all, 4 psychiatrists were called. 2 of them would say Worth was mentally ill. The other 2 described him as insane. Would the defense be able to muddy the waters just enough to get an acquittal? We, the jury, find the defendant guilty as charged. Worth's mother fainted as the verdict was read. His wife would cry. The jury would recommend mercy and sentenced him to life in prison instead of death. Worth sat with his hands clasped, staring at the floor throughout the trial. He did not testify on his own behalf. Judge Ernest Winters would say to protect the public as well as yourself, Worth should never be paroled. As always in these types of stories, I have a few things to go over. Today's video and remembrance took place at the grave of Penny K. Qualls. Linda is supposedly buried in this same cemetery. I used my available resources and walked the grounds, but I was unable to locate her grave. Perhaps I can make a second part of this video to try to locate her gravesite again. So I'm sure that this is the burning question that most of you will have. Whatever happened to Henry Clay Worth III? I've done a lot of research, and I will tell you what I have found. First off, in my research on previous stories and my studies of genealogy in general, most convicted murderers don't get a lot of fanfare in family trees for obvious reasons, so it can make piecing together the aftermath a little difficult. I did find that his name did appear in association with the West Virginia Penitentiary in Moundsville, West Virginia. That was dated 1960. The same record would possibly suggest that he was released in 1974. I could find no obituary or any other records other than he passed away in the Huntington area, which to me would suggest that he wasn't incarcerated at the time of his death. I don't know. Just trying to piece together what I could find. Either way, two young people lost their lives in a senseless and heinous murder. We never want to forget them, and we want to pay our respects to Penny and Linda Qualls. Another crime, another forgotten and unknown piece of history, another vintage murder. Forgotten by time, lives ended by the hand of someone else in cold blood. We finish their stories because they were not able to finish their own. You're watching Vintage Murder, a Whit Docs series.